Good morning. My name is Vince Dominic J. Cuevas, and I'm here to present my presentation about the methods of research, chapters 6 to 10. Let us dive right into the first chapter, reviewing literature. First, let us answer the question, what is literature review and why is it important for research? The first reason is that the review of literature is the compilation of relevant papers. Number two, it aims at describing, summarizing, evaluating, clarifying, and or integrating the prior study material according to Hart 1988. And the third one, reviewing literature is vital because without it, a researcher cannot obtain understanding or on a particular topic, particularly on how it was on how it was investigated and what was done about it. So the clear reason that literature is done is to be expert on the field that your research is to be done. Next is it is also described as a text body, and its primary objective is to update the reader with current literature on a subject and form the backbone of another objective, such as rationalizing future research in the field. Now that we know what is a literature review, let us go to the first description. According to Hart, 1998, he identified several purposes that literature review in the research study accomplishes. The first one is it distinguishes what has been done from what need to be done. Number two, discovering important variables relevant to the topic. Number three, synthesizing and gaining a new perspective. Number four, establishing the context of the topics or problem. Number five, rationalizing the significance of the problem. Number six, enhancing and acquiring the subject vocabulary. Number seven, understanding the structure of the subject. Number eight, relating ideas and theory to the applications. And lastly, identifying the main methodologies and research techniques that have been used. Now that we know what is the purpose of review of literature and what is it, let us now know how to start writing your review of literature. The first step is collect, evaluate, and select literature that is appropriate to your study. Number two, find connections and themes. Number three, plan your literature review structure. Step four, write your literature review. These are the notes that I have been using in on how I write my review of literature. The first note is that review of literature is always based on your conceptual framework. The conceptual framework is always the basis with your key concepts as the starting guidelines on the review of literature. The next one is that remember that the review of literature is a process. It should not be done in just a day. Now that we know what is a review of literature, now let us answer what is a theoretical framework. According to S. Vince and T. George, a theoretical framework is a foundational review of existing theories that serves as a roadmap for developing the argument you will use in your own work. Your theoretical framework is your opportunity to present and explain what you have learned, situated within your future research topic. Now that we know what is a theoretical framework, what is a review of literature, and what is its purpose, let us construct our theoretical framework. Um, this slide this slide talks about how to construct your theoretical framework. First, identify your key concepts. Usually, your key concepts is always written and can be seen on your conceptual framework. Number two, evaluating and explaining relevant theories. It is important um, to find the relevant theories to your own research because it is always your basis. This is why review of literature is very important in doing your study. Number three, showing how your research fits into the existing research. This is where the justification and synthesis part always do. It shows how your research fits into the existing research and how it is different to the existing research to your own research. As we can see in this slide, the conceptual framework is always the first one, with your key concepts as your guides for the next three frameworks. As you do your conceptual framework, you will go to your theoretical framework, which would be the review of literature and the specific aims of the first three buttons are the conceptual framework. The review of literature review is a theoretical framework. Let us always remember that the conceptual framework is always the basis for theoretical framework. Outline your key concepts, construct a good main objective, and construct five specific objects with a attainable goal in order to achieve a very good outcome for your theoretical framework. The first three buttons, as I've explained, is the conceptual framework, which will begin with an idea, refining that idea, state the research questions, statements in one sentence, and also specify the aim and objectives. Now that we have done the conceptual framework, we will continue with our theoretical framework, which is the literature review. We have tackled about the literature review, what is its purpose, and how can it improve our study. Now we will continue with the selection of methodology and devise the data collection method, which will be the main focus of Chapter 7, Understanding Research Methodology and Design. The first question in Chapter 7 is, what is a research methodology? Research methodology is the application of particular methods used to define, select, process, and interpret the data used to understand the issues, enabling the reader to assess the relevance and effectiveness of a study. We can see that this part is very vital for your study in order to assess if the study that you have conducted is relevant and also effective in the field of research. According to the University of Witwatersrand or Johannesburg, the exact steps or methods used to find, pick, and process and analyze information on a subject are known as the research methodology. The methodology section of a research paper gives the reader the chance to assess the general validity and dependability of a study. The two key concepts are addressed in the methodology section. How were the data gathered or produced? And the next one is, how was it examined? Let us go between the difference of a research method and research methodology. Let us first go with the research method. Research methods are perceived as techniques that are formed by the researchers of carrying out a research study. Research method applies to the behavior and devices used in the selection and development of the study procedures. And lastly, research methods assist the researchers to collect tests, collect informations, and look for a solution to an issue. That it is a good note that there's a vast difference between a research method, research methodology, and research techniques. Research methodology are termed for the models by which researchers addresses their job of clarifying, depicting, and anticipating events. It is also defined as investigating methods that take up learning. Its goal is to offer a research work plan. Research methodology is the application of particular methods used to define, select, process, and interpret the data used to understand the issue, enabling the reader to assess the relevance and effectiveness of a study. It answers the question of how the data were obtained and analyzed. Now let us go with the methodological framework. There are three parts to the methodological pyramid. This is the fundamental philosophies, research methodologies, data collection methods. The base of the methodology pyramid is the fundamental philosophy of the research study, wherein it will serve as the basis of selecting appropriate research methodology. It is a good note that selecting the appropriate research methodology is a key vital in order to attain an effective research study. Now that we know the methodological pyramid, let us first understand what are the factors to consider in order for methodology to fit in your study. The first one is the focus of the research. The second one is a statement of the problem. It is a good note that the statement of the problem is a very vital part of your research study. The methodology part should always answer your statement of the problem, its specific objective and main objective. The third one is the type of data required. And lastly, the location of the data. Now, we have talked about the factors to consider for your methodology and also the methodological pyramid. Let us go with the table 7.1 or the research methods. Um, Let us now tackle table 7.1 or the research methods. There's many research methods that can be applied to your research study. The first one is a survey research. Survey research is a method of gathering information in the form of questionnaires, either through oral, written, through phone, or online. The next one is the case study. Case study is a research methodology defined as a comprehensive analysis. Emphasize the comprehensive analysis of a confined body. The next one is the experimental design. Experimental design is a research methodology utilized when carrying out an experiment. Ethnography. Ethnographic research is conducted by through investigation of a certain culture. Action research is to develop and refine the quality of the subject's actions or performance. The next one is a grounded theory. In the grounded theory methodology, the theory of the study is gathered from the data alone. Grounded theory researchers believe that the knowledge that will be acquired from the data itself is substantial and can provide the basis of a theory of the study. Phenomenology, which deals with the investigation of life experiences of those population living the experiences. There are two types of phenomenology, hermeneutical and transcendental. The next one is the narrative research or the narrative analysis is a research methodology used in collecting and analyzing of stories of an individual who has lived the experience and told the researcher. The next one is the historical research. It is a critical investigation method of previous occurrences to precisely describe and interpret those occurrences according to Wiersma 1986. Historical research aims to describe a previous situation and corresponding definition of the current issues. The next one is the content analysis. It is a method utilized in identifying the existence of theories bounded in its text or set of texts. Content analysis is an investigation of documented people interaction like books, newspaper articles, interviews, discussion, speeches, conversation, advertising, theater, and informal conversation. The next one is a discourse analysis. It is a term used to study how language is used among individuals, both in written documents and in spoken environments. The next one is the document analysis. Document analysis is describing the study of present information of similar commercial operations or schemes to extract parts of the data appropriate to the present study, and therefore project specifications should be taken into consideration. Semiotics, also known as semiology, is the study of signs and the use of symbols. Attitude research is the method used in measuring attitudes of individuals towards anything. The next one is the image-based research. It is a research in the use which uses images in social studies. Researchers can gather information from every type of images, such as pictures, video, painting, and other kinds of visual representation. The next one is the archival analysis. It is a study or research um, involving the search and extraction of proof from archives. The next one is textual analysis. Textual analysis is a technique that includes learning the language, symbols, and images current in text in order to obtain data on how individuals make much sense of and interact experiences of life. The last one is the feminist research. The feminist method is a way to carry out research and develop a hypothesis from a female point of view. Now that we have tackled the research methods, the factor to consider, let us now know what is a methodological framework. In the previous learning, we have learned that the first one to create the first framework to create is the conceptual framework, with highlighting the key concepts, the main objectives, and the specific objectives. We can now create the theoretical framework, which consists of the review of literature. We have also tackled what is a review of literature and how can it affect the research that you have been doing. That now that we have done the first two frameworks, we are to be done the methodological framework and know what is it all about. Now, let us answer the question, what is the methodological framework? The methodological framework covers the selection of methodology and devising data collection methods. This is where the part that you have done the research itself. It is the process in which you have been gathering the data and being analyzing the data. The data that will be gathered will be the product and the voice of the research study. The methodology shall be capable of supporting the study by paving out the way of achieving the main objective of the research. And lastly, the methodological framework emerges from the conceptual framework of the research project. Just like what I have said before, the conceptual framework, the theoretical framework will be the main guidelines for your methodological framework. Now let us go with the different parts of the methodological framework. Now we will tackle the different parts of a methodological framework. We will explain the most important parts of the methodological framework. Now let us go with it. The first one is the intro or the introduction. Introduction, the researcher is introducing the research methodology and the methodology undertaken. Likewise, the population, sampling method, the collection method shall be overviewed. It should not be plenty of words. It should not be taken and deeper understanding. It should be in a short but precise manner. The research methodology. The research methodology tackles why the chosen research methodology is appropriate to your study. The next one is the population of the study. Choosing the population of the study is very important to your research because if you have chosen the wrong respondents or the population of study, the whole research could be detrimental. The population of the study or the universe is what it's called, from whom the pertinent data will be gathered. It should be briefly elaborated, such as the number of females, the number of males, and the percentage of it. The sample. The sample is a representation of the entire population. You have known the population of the study. It is very important that you also know the sample. Sample is the representation. It is the quantity. It is a very small quantity of your population of the study. There are many, the next one is a sampling method. There are many types of sampling method. The first one is simple random sampling. Second is stratified random sampling. The third one is the systematic random sampling. The fourth one is the cluster sampling. The fifth one is the multi-stage sampling. And the next one is the data gathering methods. The data gathering method um, justifies on why these methods were chosen. The next one is the issues of validity and reliability. The next one is the triangulation. And lastly, the ethics. Now that we have done the chapter 7, let us go with the chapter 8, or understanding the research methods, populations, and sampling. Okay, now let us first tackle the first question. What is a research method? A research method denotes the data gathering techniques or data collection method that is used in conducting your study. The next one, it applies to the behavior and devices used in the selection and development of the study procedures. The next question is, how is it different with the research technique? It is keynote that research methodology, and research techniques are all different from each other. The research method denotes a data gathering technique. Let us go through the two types of research methods. The first one is the quantitative and the qualitative. It is very important that you identify which type of research methods you will be using in your research study. If you have identified the two, which type of research method that you will use, it will dictate the outcome of your research study itself. The first one is the quantitative. The quantitative is that techniques are aimed at measuring data and summarizing outcomes from a sample of the amount of participants in the study. This usually in a data or numbered settings. The next one is the qualitative. Qualitative methods are attempting to obtaining a knowledge of the fundamental factors and motivations for behaviors and to determine how individuals perceive their perspectives and the environment around them. Qualitative methods gives perspective into the problem setting, producing thoughts and or hypothesis. The two research methods are very different from each other, but can be used together in order to attain a very quality research study. The next one is what are the two types of data? The first one is the primary data and secondary data. The primary data is a data that is typically collected in a quantitative data. It is a original type of data. The next one is the primary data are first-hand accounts. Primary sources produce primary data. Primary sources later will be topic. For now, we will talk about the secondary data. Secondary data is a data that is typically collected in a qualitative research. It can be gathered from research that have been done beforehand. Secondary data exists for a reason, and it is for when research has limited access to the primary data. Okay, it is a very important to note that primary sources and secondary sources will be topic later. But for the gist, primary sources produces the primary data and the secondary sources produce the secondary data. Now let us go to the methods of data collection. We have tackled the two types of data, the research methods, and what is a research method. Now we will be talking about the methods of data collection. It's very important. This graph or this table is very important for you to know because data collection is the very voice of your research study. Let us now go with it. The methods of data collection is typically separated into two: the secondary sources and the primary sources. The primary sources is gathered into three steps: the observation, interviewing, and the questionnaire. The questionnaires can be separated into the mailed questionnaire and collective questionnaire, while interviewing can be separated into the structured or unstructured. Structured, you have a set of different questions that you will be questioning the respondent. Meanwhile, the unstructured is somewhat unplanned. It is somehow that you will have a normal conversation with your respondent. The next one is the observation. Observation can be separated into the participant or non-participant. The next one is the secondary sources. It can be separated from the government publications, early research, census, personal records, client histories, service records. We have tackled that the primary sources is the we will tackle about what is a primary source and secondary source later. Now we will be talking about the sampling frame, to sample, and population. This graph is very important for you to understand because it determines the population of the study and meanwhile and also the sample that you will be using for your research study. The first one is the population. The population is a very broad um, respondents for your study. It is the overall respondents of your research study. If you have somehow applied a sampling frame, you will attain the sample, which will be the representation of your research study. It is very important that sample and population is very different from each other. The population is the very overall respondents of your research. Meanwhile, if you have gathered a shortened population or the representation of the population, you will get your own sample. The sample will represent the population of the study, and it will be the sample will be the basis of your research study for the overall population. Now that we have identified the samples, the sampling, we will now tackle about the sampling in quantitative research. These are the types of sampling in the quantitative research. The first one is a random probability sampling. The next one is the non-random probability sampling. And the last one is the mixed sampling. Now that we have tackled the sampling frame, the population to sample, the methods of data collection from the primary source, the secondary source, the two types of data, which is the primary data and secondary data, the two types of research methods, and what is a research method. We will now be going to the chapter 9, or understanding research methods, population, and sampling. First, let us question the previous lesson from chapter 8. What is a primary source? What is a primary and secondary data? Primary source produces the primary data. This is now the definition of the primary source. Primary sources are first-hand sources of evidence or proof that researcher creates and or collects on his own. The only criterion that is that it must be an original account of a certain phenomenon. If the researcher is to be done a research experiment, it will be considered as an original account of a certain phenomenon. Let us now go through the secondary source. A secondary source, researchers get a wider access to as many sources of secondary data as they can. It presents convenience to the researchers, and it provides the needed data with less expense than in conducting it themselves. Secondary sources produce secondary data. Secondary sources are often hand second account of an event. If a researcher is to be done on experimentation, and somehow a person is also use that data, they will be considered the secondary source or the secondary data. It is very keynote to understand that if you are doing a research similar or inspired with this secondary data, it is very keynote that you will use the primary source that the secondary data is using. Now that we have known the difference between the secondary sources and the primary sources, let us now tackle the advantages and disadvantages of a secondary source. The first advantage of a secondary source is it saves effort, money, and time for the researchers because the data is already there. You will not recreate or do the same procedures that as that own of the primary source. Extensiveness of the data set available. With you using the secondary data, it is very much unlimited because researchers is now use the data. Recurring data collection process maintains a level of expertise with high regard for validity and reliability. The last one helps the collection of primary data to be more detailed and exact. Now let us tackle about the disadvantages. The first one is unfitted in the research framework process because every research is unique, just like what Dr. Silva said. Every research is unique. Now, um, with you using the primary source or the second, with you using that primary source and you being the secondary source, it is somehow sometimes there will be a complication or unfit for the research your own research framework because the research framework of the primary source is different from your own. The next one is secondary data does not answer the specific questions of the researchers or lacks needed information to satisfy the researcher's desire for a study. That's like what I've said before. There's a different conceptual framework, theoretical framework. From this, the original researcher from your own conceptual framework and theoretical framework. Researchers cannot manipulate whatever data set contain. Because if you have manipulated the primary sources data, it is now fabricated and it will construct a wrong ethics considered. Accuracy, reliability, and validity of the secondary source. And lastly, it will question how reliable is your secondary source. With this question, it will now upstart the next slide, which is how reliable is your secondary source. It's very important that you critique your secondary source because it will be the basis for your study. Now let us go with it. We can identify if the secondary source is reliable by evaluating the following criteria: date, location, matter of the publication. If the publication is very much reputable. The next one is the time and place of the data gathering. The third one is the purpose of the data gathering. Fourth one, data gathering process and analysis. Fifth one, findings from the data gathered. Sixth one, conclusions drawn from the findings. And lastly, significance and the use of the data to the researcher's study. Let us now go through with the factors to consider before using secondary data. First one, sheer amount of data available. Second one, inappropriate data. Let us check before using the secondary data if the data to be used is appropriate or inappropriate for your study. The third one is validity and reliability of the source of the data. Let us check before using the data if the researcher is very much reputable in the field or they're not. The next one is other issues. Now that we have tackled secondary data, secondary source, what is a primary and secondary data, let us now go through with the final chapter, chapter 10, using observation. Let us now topic with what is observation and why is it important in research? Observation is a precise data collection. Observation can be crucial aspect and technique in conducting research, most significantly in social studies and social sciences studies. Observation is a type of data collection building blocks of the methodological framework of the research paper. Observation is a method of information gathering by means of watching an object of research. Observation is in research is characterized as a strategy to scrutinize and transcribe the activities and practices of the respondents. As the word depicts, observational methods or techniques are all about watching an object or in a much formal description of the respondents, the participants. The observation produces qualitative and quantitative data. Now, observation can be classified into three: the non-participant observation, the participant observation, and the covert observation. In a non-participant observation, the researchers has no intervention whatsoever to the sample subjects. This kind of observation occurs when a study is being done from the perspective of those who involved in what is being investigated. The researcher essentially takes the role and some action in I'm sorry. This is now for the part of the participant observation. It is a kind of observation occurs when the study is being done from the perspective of those involved in what is being investigated. The researcher essentially takes the role and some actions in what is being observed and investigated, hence the participant observation. And lastly, the covert observation from the keyword covert. The research is undercover and his true personality and goals are hidden. The subject under research is not necessarily aware or has been told that they are being observed or what is the purpose of their observation. Now let us go with the structural approach of observation in research. Observation, as we have tackled before, has has five elements. The first one is structure, participation, settings, environment, mode of administration, and concealment. Let us now go through with the structure. The first one is structured. Researchers is aware of what they want to investigate and designs a fixed structure of observation and schedule to collect the data that's to be analyzed. It is a subtype which is called the semi-structured observation. In this kind of structured observation, the researcher is somewhat aware of what needs to be observed and what type of data needs to be gathered. Researchers simply strolls the field of study and observes what they can in order to form more defined opinions and perspective. The information absorbed or observed are the data to be used in analyzing. It is very different from an unstructured observation. The information absorbed, it is a usually unstructured observation is usually used in cases where areas being observed are too broad and activities to be studied cannot easily be defined. Participation. We have tackled about this uh, um, beforehand. In a non-participation, the researchers has no intervention whatsoever to the sample subjects. This kind of observation occurs when the study is being done from the meanwhile the participation is the study being done from the perspective of those involved in what is being investigated. Observation can be also separated in the settings and environment from natural and contrived. Lastly, let us now go through with the settings of observation. First, the observation method. It has two different types, with intervention and without intervention. With intervention, the researchers have somehow control to the observation method. The researcher somehow has input to the research to be conducted. Meanwhile, without turn intervention, the researcher simply just takes notes on what the respondents or participant is to be done. With intervention, there are different types: the well settled, the control, the laboratories, and systematic research, and also the structured. In the without intervention, there are three types: the natural settings, uncontrolled, and the unstructured. We have tackled about the uncontrolled and structured, and also the structured type. Well, to be said, the with intervention, this is just means that there is the researchers is somehow controlling the input. The without interventions, the researchers is somehow only looking, somehow taking notes on the research to be conducted. With this, we are now finished with the presentation. Thank you, and I hope that you have learned from chapter 6 to 10. With this, thank you and goodbye.